If you are in need of t-shirts or banners or vinyl lettering for your truck or car, or basically anything in the graphics world, you got to hit up my guy Cody Tate at Full Spectrum Graphics. He's at 5530 Griffith Road in Hillsboro. His number is 937-205-7314. And mention that Idea Factory sent you.
4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Mike Benkert here on the hot seat.
All right.
What's
Good
up,
to
man?
be here.
Me and Brad just ran I ran 6, you ran 3 this morning.
A little less than 3.
Yeah, we are struggling, man.
Yeah.
We did last weekend we did another 6, but it was we did a bunch of hills around here, and just brutal, man. I mean, we were sore for probably 3 or 4 days. I could barely walk. I was limping around the office for 3 days.
Yeah, you're training for the Flying Pig.
Yeah. How many times you've ran it? What?
I've
How many
probably done the full maybe like 7
Oh my
or 8
God.
times.
You told me something interesting a while back about the way you eat before the run itself. Because I had always heard, I mean, obviously I'm not a runner, but I had always heard oh, you got to carb load right before the race so you have all this extra energy. But you said that's not true.
You just want to eat,
Or at least not for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think you just want to eat what you normally eat. Just have a normal dinner. If you're going to carb load, do it 2 nights before. I made that mistake of just thinking, oh, I'm going to run tomorrow. I can carb load. My first half marathon, I went to Cheesecake Factory and just crushed a full plate or whatever, and it went very badly. So
Badly how? You felt like you had a loaf of bread in your stomach the whole race or something, or what?
Well, yeah, and then you make a detour to the portalette and spend instead of actually running a full good race. So I think you just don't want to try anything new.
Yeah.
But
that makes sense.
Monday I start my 5,000 calorie diet.
5,000?
5,000 calories, 165 grams of protein a day.
165 is probably, I don't know.
It's a gram for your body weight.
Okay.
Gram for
Yeah,
each
that makes
pound
sense.
you weigh.
Yeah.
have you guys experimented with any diets? It seems like there's always.
I've messed around with the carnivore diet, and
Just straight protein all the
just
time?
straight protein all the time, and that's hard. It's not hard going in; it's hard going out. But right now, I'm trying to do more of a. It's going to be more of a high green 5,000 calorie diet, which is not me at all.
High greens and
That's gonna
5,000
be a lot of
calories?
greens.
That's a ton of greens, man.
Yeah, but I mean,
A lot of protein,
a lot of protein, a
greens.
lot of carbs. I'm going
Mhm.
a lot of carbs.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting because
So just a lot of everything.
Yeah, just
Yeah,
eat
'cause
everything you see.
yeah. Since I hurt myself, I'm not doing that deadlifting competition in April. I'm doing a strongman competition in July now.
It's the one in Greenfield.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not planning on placing at all. I'm just trying to get my feet wet.
Yeah, no, you're putting yourself out there.
Yeah.
I like having these little challenges. We're on day 44, I think, something like that, of
Too
50.
fucking long.
Yeah, of no alcohol.
Is it easier or harder now that you're getting close to the 50 days?
Well, this coming weekend we're going to Indy, and
Mhm.
I know we're going to drink the entire time, so that's the silver lining. The alcohol for me hasn't been that hard. It's we were also trying to do no cheat meals at all, and I just destroyed that thought. But not really. I mean, I've had some bad meals, but not killed my total caloric intake. But I was trying to do basically no bad meals at all, and that didn't happen. But the alcohol hasn't been too hard. What about you?
The alcohol was hard the first 2 to 3 weeks, but now I'm kind of used to it at this point. It's just, and I had already quit drinking at all during the week before we even started it. So, I was kind of already weaning off of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how much I'll actually drink after this. Like
I think I'm going to switch to heroin.
heroin.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I
not
feel like
bad.
you guys did it the right time of year though, because like winter months are
Yeah.
easier to not drink. Summer's a lot harder.
That's true.
My wife's gonna be listening to this like, yeah, you fuck. Of course it's easy. Like,
Yeah, that's another reason why it was easier for you, because
Yeah.
she can't drink right now.
yeah, the wife's pregnant, so she's like, wow, you've made it 50
Yeah.
whole days. Congratulations.
Oh, awesome! Congratulations.
Appreciate it. So we've read maybe one of the most interesting books that we've come across in this podcast this week. Malcolm Gladwell's Talking to Strangers.
Yeah, and now I think it's interesting from my understanding. So we have a couple different perspectives because I read just the regular book, and Dallas, you listened to the podcast, which,
That's a
or
great-
to
that's
the
a good
audio
point.
book, which I
Yeah.
heard is a totally different
Yeah,
experience.
and it reads like a really well edited podcast. And you know, this book is about communication, and we're going to be jumping into all these different examples, all these case studies that he lays out of examples of when you would expect communication, you know, to serve itself really well, but oftentimes we're really, really terrible at it, right? And so in the audiobook version, he says, well, it'd be a disservice if I just read to you what was said. He's like, you need to hear it in the context of who's saying it. So he either has like the actual audio of the event, or he has like actors and actresses play the part. So
for the kind of the primary case study that is at the beginning and end of the book, the Sandra Bland, is he playing like the actual
yeah, he's
audio
playing the actual
tape of it?
audio.
Okay.
I think it'd be good if we just watched it. So
You want to watch it first and then go over it?
yeah,
All right.
Hello, ma'am. When it takes higher patrol, the reason for your stop is you failed to signal the lane change. You got your driver's license and insurance with you? Give me a few minutes, all right? You okay?
I'm waiting on you. This is your job. I'm waiting on you. What do you want me to
Oh,
do?
you seem very irritated.
I am. I really am. I feel like this crap is what I'm getting for tickets for. I'm just getting out of your way. You're just speeding up, tailing me. So I move over and you stop me. So yeah, I am a little irritated, but that doesn't stop you from giving me a ticket. So.
Are you done?
You asked me what was wrong and I told you.
Okay.
So now I'm done, yeah.
Okay. You mind putting out your cigarette, please, for mine?
I'm in my car, but I put out my cigarette.
Well, you can step on out now.
I don't have to step out of my car.
Step out of the car. Step
No,
out
you
of
don't
the car.
have, no, you don't have the right.
Step out of the car.
You do not have the right to do that.
I do have the right. Now step out or I will remove
I
you.
refuse to talk to you other than to identify myself.
Step out or I will remove
I
you.
didn't get removed for a failure.
Step out or I will remove you. I'm giving you a lawful order. Get out of the car now or I'm going to remove you.
And I'm calling my.
I'm going to yank you out of here.
Okay, you gonna yank me out of my car?
Get out.
Okay. All right.
25.
Let's do this.
Yeah, we're going to.
Yeah. Don't touch me.
Get out of the car.
Don't touch me. I'm not under arrest. You don't have the right to take
You
me
are
out of
under
my car.
arrest.
I'm under arrest for what?
25.
For what?
7 County Airfare 1098. Just
For
order
what?
290. Send me to the unit. Get out of the car.
Get
Get out of the car now.
Why am I being apprehended? You trying to give me a ticket?
I said
for
get
failure?
out of the car.
Why am I being hard?
I'm going to drag you out of here.
So you're gonna drag me out of my own car?
Get out of the car.
And then you
I will light you up. Get out.
Wow.
Now.
Wow.
Get out of the car.
For a failure to signal, you doing all of this for a
Get
failure?
over there.
Right, yeah. Yeah, let's take this to court. Let's do
Go
it.
ahead.
For a failure signal. Yep, for a failure signal.
Get off the phone.
On my school.
Get off the
I'm not
phone.
on the phone. I have a right
Put
to
your
court.
phone
This is my
down.
property.
Put
This is
your
my
phone
property.
down.
Sir?
Put your phone down. Right now. Put your phone down.
For a failure signal, my goodness.
Come over here.
Y'all are interested.
Come over here now.
You feeling good about
Stand right here.
You feeling good about yourself?
Stand right
For a
there.
failure signal, you feel real good
Turn
about
around.
yourself, don't you?
Turn
You
around.
feel good about yourself,
Turn
don't you?
around now.
What are you?
Put your hands
Why
behind
am
your back
I
and
being
turn around.
arrested?
Turn around.
Why can you tell
I'm
me?
giving you a lawful order. I will
Why
tell
am I
you.
being arrested?
Turn
Why
around.
won't you tell me that part?
I'm giving you a lawful order. Turn around.
Why will you not tell me?
You are not
before
complying.
I'm not complying because you just pulled me out of my car.
Turn around.
Are you f***ing kidding scared of a female.
If you would just listen.
I was trying to serve a ticket. Whatever.
Stop moving.
Are you serious?
Stop moving.
Oh, I can't wait till we go to court. Oh, I can't wait. I cannot wait till we go to court. I can't wait. Oh, I can't wait. You want me to sit down now?
No.
Or you gonna throw me to the floor? That make you feel better about yourself?
Knock it off.
No, that make you feel better about yourself? That make you feel real good, won't it? You gonna tell your signal you doing all of this. The little ass Prairie View, Texas. My God, they must have...
You were getting a warning. Until now, you're going to jail.
No, I'm getting it for what?
You can come
For
read.
what?
Come read what?
I'm getting a warning for what?
Stay right
For
here.
what? Well, you
Stay
just
right
pointed me
here.
over there.
I said stay right
Get
here.
your out right. Let me... Oh, I put on my life down some... A cop for a ticket. You
I
gonna
got
take me to
control.
jail?
She's in handcuffs.
What a... What a... What? You about to break my wrist.
Stop moving.
I'm standing still. You
Stay
keep
right
moving
here.
me, goddammit.
Stay right there.
Don't touch me. For a traffic ticket, you know, for a traffic ticket.
Come right over here. This right here says a warning. You started creating the problem.
You asked me what was wrong.
Do you have
I'm trying to
anything
tell
on
you.
the person that's
Do
illegal?
I feel like I got anything on me? This a maxi dress.
Remove your glasses.
This a maxi dress.
Come on over here.
Have on me. You're about to break my wrist. Can you stop? You are about to break my wrist.
Stop! Now! Stop it!
Stop resisting, man.
If you would stop, then I would kill you! Now stop!
You are such a... You are such a... No,
You're yanking around.
Oh, traffic signal.
You are yanking around. When you pull away from me, you're resisting arrest.
This makes you feel real good, don't it? A female for traffic signal. For traffic signal. I know that makes you feel good, Officer 18.
Take care of yourself.
I know it makes you feel real good. You're a real man now. You just slam me, knock my head in the ground. I got epilepsy, you mother...
Good.
Good. All right, yeah, this is real good. Real good for a female, yeah.
It's hard to watch.
Yeah, that was interesting. I guess I was surprised initially about. I thought it was going to be a lot more contentious from the beginning, but it starts off, very reasonable. But one of the
Well, I mean, from one perspective, but I mean, she's pulled over because. Okay, so.
well, I guess what I meant by that,
Okay.
let me clarify, is that the tone of a voice was a lot more civil.
Okay, yeah, sure,
Civil.
yes.
One of the subtle cues that Malcolm Gladwell mentions in the book, and you can see on that video, is the first time he approaches on the passenger's side,
Mm-hmm.
which is what you typically do. When he goes back to where he's on the driver's side, and that is something that is done. You're exposing yourself to traffic as a cop only when you're suspect of the driver potentially reaching for a weapon or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that, when we talk about talking to strangers, that's
Yeah.
something maybe I didn't know this, but if I get pulled over and the cop comes to me from the driver's side window,
Yeah.
I'd be like, okay, this guy is, a little edgy already.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was crazy.
There are a couple things in there that, I mean, every time I listen to this or watch it or whichever, I get more frustrated each time that I watch it. There are like two things especially that really makes me mad. The first one is when he goes, I can tell you're a little bit irritated. Why are you so irritated? And she explains to him, you rush up on me. I thought that you're trying to get around me, so I pull over,
Mm-hmm.
and then you pull me over because I don't signal. Are you kidding me? And that's a very logical explanation. And his response to that is to pause for a while and then go, "Are you done?" Okay, first strike against you, man. If that's the first one, I mean, there are probably others before that. The other one that really, really irks me is clear at the end of this video when he's already slammed around the ground. That portion of the video is cut off from this frame, but he apparently slams her down and she says, I have epilepsy and you're slamming me on the ground. And he goes, good.
Oh, I didn't hear that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, my blood boils every time I hear that.
Then she, was taken to jail and killed herself. Like I think 3 days.
Yeah, 3 days later,
Later.
she's found hanging in her cell.
Wasn't it illegal for them to open your vehicle unless you are under arrest? I mean, I guess I don't know the laws of Texas, but
Yeah, he kind of dives into that stuff, right?
Yeah, so that's kind of the loophole, and it's very similar strategy when you think about when you fly in TSA, how they just like screen you for everything, just looking for if they can find something. So this specific method of policing, which is what he goes into one of the later chapters, is that they basically just, the one way you can actually sort of legally search people without any suspicion effectively is to pull them over, because you can just have like the littlest thing, like your tail lights out, you failed to signal, stuff that like no driver does. So it's basically like you can just pull over anybody for anything whenever. So I forget how many similar stops this guy made that day. He makes dozens and dozens a day. He's probably made thousands and thousands of these like frivolous stops.
Yeah, and Gladwell explains that, I mean, this kind of behavior from police officers isn't just unique to this guy. I mean, and I appreciate that he's not presenting this in a racial way. He says, one group typically sees, white versus black, but they're seeing the forest without the detail of the trees, and the other group is seeing the trees without the context of the forest. So he's saying, wait a second, there's something bigger entirely here with, look how these two are communicating with each other. I mean, he's a white cop in a small town in Texas. Can you pull up Prairie View, Texas, just to see where we're at?
Yeah, so Sandra Bland, I believe, was just down there for a interview at Prairie View A&M. I think she might have been from Chicago.
yeah, she was.
Yeah. So, I mean, our species has very different sectors. And, I mean, these two are almost as completely different.
She's a stranger.
Strangers.
It was somebody, just somebody, a local, person that lived in Prairie View, or numerous different factors that thing would have probably totally gone differently.
And look, it's not like police officers are pulling people over for these small infractions because they want to be assholes. This is in the name of preventing crime, right?
Yeah, and it was what he specifically refers to. It's called like the Kansas City method, and the idea is that crime is usually very concentrated, not only just in like bad neighborhoods to a couple streets.
Right.
In the way that in Kansas City they were able to successfully clean up crime is that they focused on these couple streets, and they basically, in those streets, they pulled over people for everything, and it was successful. But Prairie View's out in the middle of nowhere. It's not a center of crime. There's really, he even mentions this. There's really no reason to be
zoom way out.
I think the police officer said he found like one gun in all the entire times that he's been working on the beat. So,
and that's in Texas, where everyone has a
keep
gun.
zooming. I'm trying to find the. Okay.
Houston, a little bit off.
Yeah, it's. Well, I think a lot of times when they, when this broke news, they were describing Prairie View as this suburb of Houston. You can see how far out it is. I mean, this is a small, little, quiet town.
Yeah, it's kind of like Hillsborough is a suburb of downtown Cincinnati.
Right.
Pretty much.
That's
probably even more
exactly
so.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're a third of the way to Austin from there.
Yeah, it said there was only like 5,700 people in the 2010 census in Prairie View.
That's almost exactly what Hillsborough is.
that might actually be less than what Hillsborough is. Because I think Lynchburg's like 2,000 or 3,000.
So that's a perfect example. So I mean, imagine around here, a cop rushes up on you, you pull over, and he pulls you over because of it, and then you end up in a confrontation like that.
Yeah, at 6600 in Hillsborough in 2010.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Besides the Bland part, what were some other case studies that jumped out at you?
Well, I mean, I think there's something to gain from each one of the ones he talked about, and they're all pretty high profile, and I've heard of them before. The one I guess I wasn't too familiar with is he talks about these Cuban spies.
That was my favorite part.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what decade this is probably in. This is maybe in the 80s.
Yeah, I'm guessing.
But it talks about this guy in the CIA, basically the cream of the crop, the top guy, everything you could want. They refer to him as a mountain climber. He's still to this day, like, I think Malcolm Gladwell actually had was able to talk to him, but nobody knows who he really is other than just his nickname, the mountain climber. And he talks about how basically all these spies that he thought he had and contacts he had with intel on Fidel Castro and the Cuban government, every single one of them, and there was probably dozens, all of them were double agents. And,
right.
And he just had no idea. And it's not like they were doing this spectacular spy novel type of job. It's just, he was totally played by them. And it's because he makes this point that just as humans, this is similar to other situations. Bernie Madoff was a similar situation. Like, if you look into Bernie Madoff, it seems on the surface like it's so obvious he was running this Ponzi scheme. Right. Like, he was running his accounting operation out of like this strip mall, like this random strip mall somewhere. Is where his accountant was. He was making these types of returns that had like made no sense with
right.
And his explanation when he got audited was just like, "Oh, I'm really good at this," and everyone at the IRS was like, "Oh,
yeah.
okay, yeah."
Yeah, I thought this idea of a truth to default was super interesting because, kind of like you're describing, I mean, how often do we get tricked or played or conned or whatever you want to call it, or cheated on, and you're like, God, how could I not see all of these red flags?
Gullible.
That one of your first reactions after that event is to be like, God, I'm so stupid. How did I not see this? But to his point, that's because you're a human. I mean, if you were on edge and looking for every single little red flag to pop up at all times, I mean, you'd be so paranoid you couldn't make it through the day.
Yeah. He makes a point, like, you shouldn't blame yourself because we default to truth because as a society, that's how we grow and we live with each other. If, your whole objective going back to the caveman days is to, procreate, find a mate and, pass on your genes. Just think about the relationships that you've been in or you're in. It's like, or do you want to be with someone that is trust you and is good to be around, or do you just want to be with somebody that's totally paranoid and that all the time? So it makes sense from that standpoint, and it's scary how we miss things because of that. Like, you look at Jerry Sandusky,
yes,
and I think even more so from Michigan State, Nassar, is that Larry Nassar?
Yeah,
is that
Larry Nassar.
Like, he was abusing these girls
with parents in the room. Yeah.
And think how those parents must feel like, and there's dozens and dozens of them probably.
Yeah. But the one that gave me cold chills when you actually hear the voice of one of the gymnast dads, he was saying, his daughter is saying, like, Dad, I don't think the treatment I'm getting from Nassar is helping my back problems. And, the dad is saying, like, well, Larry Nassar is the best what is his actual? He's not just a trainer. He's more than that, right? He's like
No, he's a doctor. He's like he's a physician. That he was, I think, beyond Michigan State, he was like the physician for U.S. gymnastics as well.
Yeah.
So,
well, this dad is like, if this guy can't help you, I mean, there's nobody in the world that can help you. So you need to keep going back to him because, he's the best. Where else can you go? So just like to hear, the dad saying that, and the girl is like, she's not saying this, but they had described that like he would pawn off to these girls that you have nerve endings and like in your vagina that he would have to massage out. And, yeah, and right in front of the parents, and the parents are just,
and nobody questioned that.
It's like a lull you to sleep kind of thing. It's not like he went straight to that. It's like you build up this like rapport and a trust with somebody, and then like things that when you're on the outside like we are, and they seem like so obvious and like a giant red flag, that in the moment they don't. It's a fascinating part of psychology to me.
It's almost being like completely brainwashed.
Pretty much.
Not to say shit, I'm gonna try that when I go home.
I'm gonna help your back out, baby.
Yeah. Not making light of that situation. I'm just saying.
and then going back to Penn State with Jerry Sandusky, a bunch of people took the fall for that. I think the president of the university maybe did, but
sorry, look up Jim Jordan right now. This is a case that's going on at the exact same moment. Sorry to cut you off.
Okay, I'm not familiar with.
Okay, so Jim Jordan is a congressman right now, and he was at OSU. I forget what his role is or was, but he's in almost the exact same situation that the president at Penn State was in.
He's a congressman.
He's a congressman now, but he's getting a bunch of heat because he knew about somebody in the staff that was a shady dude. I don't even know what the whole context of it was. But as I was reading this came up in my Twitter feed, and they're like, Jim Jordan knew about this. How could he have not gotten rid of this guy? And I was thinking, like, it's probably because it's way more nuanced than that.
Yeah. And yeah, I think being more familiar with the Penn State situation, what Malcolm talks about is, as a president of the university, it's like you just have to be trusting and empower people below you. Like, you're not going to be able to micromanage everything that's
right.
going on. So it makes you a good president that people want talent wants to work for you. Is that you trust them and you empower them. So he's not going to be paranoid about every single little.
Right.
I mean, it's not a little thing, but he's not going to be looking for that. And we have this default to truth. Yeah. The kids like going to Michigan State or the parents of the kids that Sandusky abused, I mean, they weren't even aware of it with their own kids. So how do you expect like the president to necessarily be? Yeah,
well, just to give that example some context for people that haven't read this, the reason people are looking for other heads to fall is because from the time Sandusky is outed until the time that he finally gets evicted or whatever, it's like there's like 11-year gap. So they're like, well, how could that possibly be? So when we're on the outside and we're looking in and we don't understand all the nuances that are being played, in that scenario, like, how the hell could that be? Like, somebody's head has got a roll for this,
I mean, it seems like if you'd even have a sniff of something like that, you would investigate it fully.
Well, I mean, put yourself in this guy's shoes, though. So you're the president. You have Sandusky had been there for decades, right? Like with Paterno. He's been there for years, and all of a sudden you get somebody that says, okay, first off, they don't know definitively if he's doing this.
Yeah.
The main witness was Mike McQuarrie, right? You remember that name?
Yeah.
And he said, hey, I think I saw Sandusky in a shower. I think I heard like some like slapping noises, but I'm not really sure. And I know there was another kid in there. Like he's still like grasping what he saw.
He's doubting himself, and I don't know if this probably made things even more ambiguous. But Sandusky always like he had all these like camps, and like
Right.
he like had all these nonprofits with kids. He had like
Had
a
kids
crazy
around
amount of
all
like
the time.
foster kids or something.
I wasn't aware of that, but
I
it would
forget
make
what it was.
sense.
He mentioned something where he was like, it wasn't out of the ordinary to see him around with these younger
Right.
boys, and it's like now especially look, you think you get real suspicious about that, and maybe at the time people could have been, but
they also couldn't pin down a straight answer from the victims either.
Yeah,
They were saying like, did you have, like intercourse, or, what did you do something with him? And at first it would be, well, he just touched me or something. Or then it would be, he would have different stories contradicting each other. The timelines wouldn't match up. So when you're sitting back and watching this, and you're like, am I about to fire this guy based off of what? Like you don't know what the actual case of it is, So, and that stuff takes some time, and in this case, it took 10 or 11 years. So.
And he kept doing it the whole time. It never stopped him.
He was doing it after, as he like first got it.
Oh,
out.
no. I thought you meant. Never mind.
Yeah, no, but yeah,
I
I
got
got you.
yeah, and it's very similar to the Michael Jackson Neverland. It has a lot of parallels between that, even though that isn't discussed in the book. And it's like, I'm sure there were things that went wrong. It's certainly, you can be critical of the administration. I'm sure there were some failures, but I think the point that I get out of this is just like, there's two sides to every story. So if you kind of gain that perspective, and I think moving forward is like understanding like your default is to overlook a lot of this stuff. So then maybe you can be understanding like it's good to trust people, but maybe you can say like, well, that's what I default to. So maybe I can, if you get just a little bit of suspicion, maybe dive into that more, because there might be something more to it.
I think my big takeaway from this is to not be so fast to like form an opinion really on anything. Like we need to just get better as a species of just being comfortable with not understanding everything.
The Cubcath kids.
Yes, great one. Yeah, great example.
With that situation, everyone just jumping on them, seeing like one snapshot of it, and thinking they know everything. So seeing like basically that's what it is. You see a snapshot of a stranger, you come up with all these assumptions, and that's problematic.
Yeah,
so
I mean, and it's going to be very hard when you're like hearing, a case against kids or something like that to like delay your judgment. But I think this book is really making it clear that, things aren't so black and white. There's way more gray area than there is black or white.
I think our politics views, I hate to bring politics back into it, but that's where a lot of your quick decisions come from. Like you'll instantly back a guy that's got the same views as you.
Yeah, and we're in this 140 character world where it's like, how dare you do this or how dare you do that?
Like, I'm not going to say which party, you can figure it out, but if they watched that video, they would say, well, she should have just complied. She should have quit fighting. She should have put out her cigarette. But if you look at it from both sides, the dude was super aggressive.
That video has to piss off police officers to no end. They're just screaming like, what's the point, man? Like, write her...
It was a warning. It wasn't a ticket.
Give her a warning and go on with your day. Like, put your ego aside for a second and just go on. What's up, guys? If you're looking for a barber, you got to go see my guy, Danny Roberts, at Sheer Savage Salon in Hillsboro. It's at 317 East Main Street. Give him a call, 937-393-2404. You're a man now. It's time to start going to a real barber instead of these cheap places. go see Danny Roberts. Sheer Savage Salon, and if you're a lady, you can go there too. They have much more lady stylists than the men at this point. He's my guy. Go see him and mention that Idea Factory sent you.
So you want to do you think we're good with those case studies, or do you want to talk about some of the other?
Oh yeah, jump to wherever.
One of the other ones that I thought was interesting was, because I was a little bit familiar with it, the Stanford swimmer that got
Brock Turner. You pull it back.
And his point to Malcolm's point to this is in the Brock Turner movie. We should give people some context on this. It was a sexual assault case between two Stanford students, Brock Turner, who was on the swim team, and I'm not sure what the girl's name was. She was.
I don't think they ever gave her a name because it was an assault case. I think they just called her like Emily Doe. Yeah,
Emily Doe. So she was, and I want to say I think her identity's actually come out since then. She might have like wrote a book or something.
Mm-hmm. Is that her?
Chanel Miller.
Chanel Miller.
Okay.
And so they were at this party, this frat party, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
They both got drunk. I think Brock Turner got convicted of raping her. But what Malcolm talks about in this whole talking to stranger and this other layer of complications, and is a huge problem on college campuses everywhere, and is an ingredient in pretty much almost every single assault case you hear about is alcohol, and people don't want to address that.
Yes,
there's
absolutely.
a lot of awareness, and you'll see it on any campus. There's a lot of knowledge and education out there about sexual assault and being aware of it, and they have good programs to address that. And it's a huge problem, but you never really see anything about alcohol or the dangers of alcohol and what role it plays in it. Like I can't remember ever walking on college campus and seeing like, be careful about drinking or whatever. It's just such an accepted
it's
part of
Animal
college.
House. I mean, every kid grows up thinking college is a party.
Well, it's not even only college. It's like 90% of all adults drink alcohol, and nobody really. Alcohol always gets a pass.
And he talks about to the point of just drinking to excess and getting blackout drunk where you don't remember.
Man, that's the one that scares me. You don't strike me as much of a drinker, but
well, not. I've never been blackout.
Never
blackout drunk.
It's not fun.
It honestly, it scares the shit. Like when I was in college,
why. Because
when I was in college, I used to think, oh yeah, I got, like you almost like brag about it, like you know what I mean, like.
Dallas has pulled me out of the bathroom when I was blackout drunk at one point.
But what's crazy, and he hits on it, is like your hypothalamus that keeps your body still functioning.
So someone's functioning when they're blackout drunk, and just talking to you. I'm sure they maybe seem like they're drunk, but they're actually able to hold a conversation, do different things like. Travel different places, and then just like not remember any of it.
Terrifying.
Yeah. Well, that was the case in this Brock Turner. Okay, that's the part that I didn't realize. I mean, I'm not a person that really follows like these, like big cases like this too intently. I kind of know from the surface.
Yeah, I think that's the way I see. You've heard about him in the news. Yeah. But that's what I appreciate about this is he takes something that's kind of pretty well known, where you have your own little snap judgment or takeaway, and then he really takes it apart and gets more in depth to some of the issues within it.
So, I mean, again, everything we're talking about is about communication. So this one is a case study of like what happens to communication when you're first just at a base level drunk. What happens again when you're blackout drunk? And what happens at a third level when sex is involved, which it goes hand in hand. And where's the line of consent?
And they also didn't know each other, so it's like you're strangers, so you don't know how much different they are from their normal sober personality when
Right.
you're interacting with.
Yeah,
with them
well, she
either.
said afterwards, she's like, I wouldn't have done any of this. I'm in a committed relationship, which I didn't know.
That doesn't really matter.
But it just shows you like how, totally opposite you can be when you're at that level.
So is she saying that he like forced himself, or she just doesn't remember?
She doesn't remember. And
So how can she prove that he raped her?
because 3 guys walked up on
Oh,
him
okay.
assaulting her. But his defense is based off of, because he's blackout drunk too, right? And so he's telling his side of the story from what he hopes happened, which is he can kind of remember at the beginning of the night they were kind of talking, whatever, and his story is that they were drinking together, and he says, "Hey, do you want to go back to my place?" And she says, "Sure." They start walking back to his place. She slips, grabs him to help herself, and it pulls him down too, and they just start giggling about it. And next thing you know, they're on the ground, and they're they start messing around and whatever. And then at some point in all of this, she totally blacks out, and that's when a couple guys walk up on them, and they're like, "Hey, she's completely gone. What the hell are you doing?" And he gets up and runs.
Yeah, well, so blackout doesn't necessarily mean you're unconscious. You could be unconscious, but you can be blackout drunk and still.
Yes,
be
I probably said that wrong.
Mhm.
She was completely unconscious
Mhm.
at this point. So I don't know really if he's saying that he was unaware that she had gone from blackout to unconscious, or what he's saying. But the point is, he doesn't know. He's hoping that what he's saying is the case.
But isn't that still your decisions, even if you are blacked out?
Right, and that's what the jury ultimately found. So
God, I would hate to be on the jury of that trial.
yeah, well, and then where it took the nasty turn is that, and it didn't even get discussed in the book, which I appreciated, was that he ultimately got a super light sentence because of affluenza or whatever. I'm glad he didn't dive into that, because that was beside the
Mhm.
point. Yeah, I don't know. I thought that was a pretty interesting one. What did you think of the part about waterboarding Sheikh Mohammed?
Oh, that was another interesting one. I totally
pull
forgot
up-
about that one.
I think it's Shiek Mohammed. Okay, so Sheikh Mohammed is he's the planner and the fundraiser for 9/11, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so is that him?
Yep.
Okay.
It's got a long name.
So he was like the case study for what happens when you're under extreme stress, and in this case, he was one of the first to ever be waterboarded. I think, was he one of the first, or was it just a?
No, I
case
don't
study?
think so. He actually was kind of unique because he found a technique where waterboarding didn't work.
Oh yeah,
work
that's
on
right.
him.
He was somehow opening up his sinuses, and it wasn't
It's
affecting him.
just pouring out of his mouth.
But so the challenge with this is like, how do you get somebody like him to talk?
Right.
And so I think, the interrogators tried different techniques. Waterboarding was usually one of the most effective, but other things they do is like sleep deprivation, where they just they let you like, it's really twisted. I think it totally messes you up, like, because they kind of let you sleep, but you don't get into like the REM cycle or whatever. And I forget what else they do.
They put you in a barrel and they fill it up to water up to your nose, and there's a hole behind you.
Yeah. So he actually goes into talking about how a psychologist they put him under those same tests, and not just him, but a bunch of like our soldiers. They They did all these different tests on them, and their hypothesis that, like, okay, these guys know that we're not going to kill them, and they know that they're in a,
Like training.
they're in their own testing environment, so they're going to be okay, right? Wrong. They would come out of there like, these are like Green Berets, and they would, just leave there in tears, and it would take weeks for them to, like, gather themselves again. I don't know where we were at before that.
I don't think that's the same guy. I think this is a different guy. Because if you do the waterboarding, this guy pops up.
If that's who it is.
Yeah, the other guy wasn't the right guy.
Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, yeah, that's right.
So so it goes a lot into what you get people to talk, and how if, like, what they're telling you is the truth and all this stuff. But the big kind of catch of it
What's that
is
say?
there was some more scientific studies telling you that when you're under extreme stress, not even to the extent like this torture that would make you talk, but it actually negatively impacts your memory, so where you can't recall things. So I forget what experiment that this was based on, where they put people. Oh yeah, they had to basically they gave soldiers were the test subject.
Yeah,
is they had to see an image and then draw it out in their mind.
Yes.
So they were able to,
like, just a simple picture, like a box with a sail
X or
shape.
something,
Yeah.
yeah, it was this drawing figure where it was pretty simple shapes, but it wasn't just like a dog or something where you would just be able. You actually had to kind of
remember the placement and stuff.
Yeah.
Like that.
So they did it, and, like, without under stress, they totally pretty much replicated what this was. But then they put them through some testing. I think it was like this. It is actually similar to what they do to try to interrogate people. They had like sleep deprivation or all this other stuff, and and then they had to draw that same thing, and it was like totally off.
Right.
It was like not good as a result. So it's kind of like, well, if you get these guys to talk, you go through all this stuff to get them to talk, but then they're so stressed that they can't actually give you good information.
Yeah. So, Travis, can you pull up all of his confessions? Just Sheikh Mohammed confessions. This dude was saying that he was going to blow up the Eiffel Tower and the Panama Canal and the White House and
assassinate Bill Clinton.
Bill Clinton. He was
Carter.
saying anything bad that you can possibly dream up. Guess what? I did it, or I was planning to do it. Good thing you caught me.
So how do you believe anything he said?
Exactly. That's the whole point of this. So you got him to speak. Well done. He's speaking now, but what of it is true?
When I was listening to this, I was thinking, what if you had a innocent man and you're doing all this stuff, and finally he just starts admitting to whatever you're trying to get?
Yeah. Well, he says there's two obvious things here. One of them is, he's just done being tortured. They're going to just keep doing this until he says something. And two is, look, I'm not getting out of prison ever.
Yeah.
You're going to kill me anyway. Why not? There we go. Okay. But to finish that thought, why not go down as the biggest, baddest terrorist that ever lived?
Mm-hmm.
So, member of the Al-Qaeda Council, planning of 9/11, had a cell for biological weapons, which they did not do, a dirty bomb.
Yeah, there it is. I was responsible for planning the assassination of ex-U.S. presidents, including Carter and Clinton. So it's like, poor Jimmy Carter. I don't know what I don't know what he did.
Yeah, there's the Panama Canal. But then there was one building that he said that he had planned to blow up, and they're like, hold on a second.
The Sears building?
Was it the Sears?
He claimed that he was going to do something.
No,
to
it couldn't have
Sears.
been
It
the
was-
Sears because it's old.
It was some building he was that was not even
Constructed.
constructed at the time.
Yeah, it was constructed after he was in captivity.
I can't remember what it was.
They're like, hold on. So, yeah, I mean, some of these things, like, that in some cases, these communication issues are just like, okay, they are what they are. In others, they're like critically important to understand.
What was amazing to me is like the FBI and like they did tests with judges, only scored like 54%. Like,
Oh yeah, I
accurate.
forgot about that one. Yeah.
And like, if you get wrongly accused of something, you might as well flip a coin.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's just terrifying.
Yeah. So
That's
okay,
a good point. Let's transition into that.
Yeah. So okay, explain that whole.
I can.
Sorry. Yeah. Just go ahead.
Where I think this comes in is that we have this impression where it's like we know people, strangers, let's say, because we've talked to them face to face.
Yes.
So it's kind of like you look at someone's resume for an interview, you bring them in, it's like, well, I don't know, it's like kind of questionable, but then you talk to them and it's like, I think they'll do a good job because I see them, I know them face to face.
Yeah.
And that same thing happened going back to, pre-World War II with Neville Chamberlain going this, like,
Yeah,
they hear about Hitler doing all this and planning to do all this terrible things, and he goes
Did you get to that part? I figured that would be the one that would be the most interesting.
Yeah,
to do.
he goes and meets with Hitler, and they have a conversation, and he Chamberlain comes back and is basically like he's not gonna invade Poland or whatever it was that they're talking about, and of course he did. So what?
He actually got Hitler to sign like some sort of peace agreement. And he brings it back. He's like, "Look what I did, guys! Check this out. We ain't going to war."
Yeah, that was funny to me.
And then within 6 months, Hitler's invading Poland.
Yeah, so he just Malcolm Gladwell just kind of says like, he should have just read Mein Kampf and like and left it at that. And so in some cases, you're better off. It's one thing like if you really get to know. The most valuable thing is if you have a long relationship with somebody, you know them, then you can read them and understand like the way they act and tick. But if it's going to be either just judging someone based on their actions and what you've read about them and what they've done, versus taking that and also combining it with like a quick sit down where you can look them in the eye and do that, you're way better off like skipping the part where you like look them in the eye if you're trying to like understand somebody.
Yeah, that was really fascinating. But back in the case of,
and so this goes to your point about the judges.
So yeah, explain that part where he was talking about like the automated, basically they're trying to pick out which guys should be granted bail.
They had like a computer program, I think, that went through and like went through all their previous arrests and history and this and that. I forget what it scored, but it was much higher than when they went back and evaluated like a group of judges. A group of judges only scored like 54% correct.
And the idea was that for the judges, they had the actual person accused. They saw them like in person in the courtroom and like looked them in the eye and like looked into their soul, and they like knew instantly who they were, because like we as humans are connected on that level, which is just not.
Yeah, and when you think of it from a data perspective, I mean, the judges have more data because they can see if they're quote unquote remorseful. They can, like you're saying, look them in the eye.
They were saying that was almost a disservice to have that part of the information.
Yeah. They said the bot was 25% more effective at choosing which inmates would commit crimes while out on bail than the judges.
Seems like we should just go to that.
I'm not sure I'd want to go in front of a robot.
I don't know if you want to go in front of a judge either.
I've been in front of judges and it worked out pretty well.
I guess if you were guilty, you'd have a better chance against the judge.
Yeah. 25% better. Yeah.
And I mean, that assumes, because what that assumes is that people, show their thoughts and feelings on their face, which is not true.
Yeah.
These micro expressions that we think, surprise looks a certain way, happy looks a certain way.
I was wanting to watch that little clip that he gives an example of. The Friends clip.
Yeah.
Monica.
So what?
See if you can find this clip.
So in the book, Malcolm Gladwell represents or refers to this Friends episode where, you know, something's going on where people are happy and angry and all the emotions, and just how visible it is on their face.
But what's the actual scene? Do you remember?
I don't know. I never watched it.
I think it's
I'm the same way.
I think it's Monica talking to shit. Not Chandler, the other guy,
Ross.
her brother, Ross. Yes, I kept wanting to say Russ.
Monica and
I'm gonna need a little more to go off of.
Monica and Ross get together, and Chandler finds out.
I think it was about Chandler. Like, she was telling him that she was in love with him.
There are Friends fanatics watching this. They're screaming at us right now. Freaking idiots.
I
bad thing is
I hate this fucking show. So
I've seen almost every episode, but I can't.
But his point is that basically because of TV, we've developed this sense that every emotion that we ever have, it should be displayed prominently. Like you could watch that basically it muted like we did, and you know exactly what's going on because you can see everything in their faces. Right?
And it's actually something that's socialized into us rather than something that we're biologically inclined to do.
Mm-hmm.
So he references a couple different experiments on this. And the case study that this ties into is the one about Amanda Knox, which if you remember, she was a student, I think, studying abroad. Her roommate was.
Have you watched the documentary on her?
I haven't. So
definitely check it out. You watched it, didn't you?
No.
Yeah.
The documentary.
You?
I'm weird as fuck. You know, I've watched it. Watch all that shit.
Yeah, so she's studying abroad, and her roommate gets murdered, and she's they accuse her of the murder, but she's like this really like quiet and quirky girl, and what's the term that he uses?
Mismatched in terms of.
But there's also transparency and facial expressions.
Yeah, so like the Friends episode, they're really transparent in terms
you can
of
see
like on their face you can see exactly what their emotions are. Where and I related this one because I definitely identify as someone that's mismatched in that, you know, if I'm surprised or sad or happy, like there's certain situations where it'll be apparent, but a lot of times like I kind of just have the same expression. So you want to know how I'm feeling based on what I'm what my facial expressions are.
Yeah, I have resting bitch face pretty much most of the time.
My wife bitches at me about like at Christmas time I'll get something and I might be super happy that I got it, and I'm just got the same face. She's like, you hate it. I'm like, no. This
is my fucking face.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
resting bitch face would be actually a really good example of this.
That is a really good example.
But what the studies that were done to show that these facial expressions aren't biologically tied to what we're feeling, a couple that he did, one of them is he takes a group of people that are led down this, you know, typical drywall corridor, with ceiling panels or whatever that you have, like just this long corridor that looks normal, and you go into like this ordinary room and they, you know, are assigned to do some task, and then they do it, and while they're doing this task, like these walls that were up, the ceiling, all that was just like kind of just fake placeholder, and they take out these walls, and it's just like this room that's just red, like it's red everywhere. I think there's like a small hanging light bulb, and then like it's one of the test taker or experimentees' friends they come out of doing this activity to what they think is going to be this long typical corridor, and it's just this red room. There's, you know, a chair. It's like one of their friends, and they're sitting like under this light that's hanging. And what they do is they are video recording them to see what expression they make, because that's like the most surprising thing you could imagine. So you think it's like, oh, their jaw's gonna drop and they're gonna get a typical surprise emotion. It turns out that wasn't the case at all. People like don't make any expression or have some sort of just blank look. It's not surprise. You don't read surprise on their face. So that was one, and then the other one is they did a study where scientists go out to this real remote tribe that has like no contact with the outside world, and they show them like different pictures of different human emotions, like based on friends,
a sad face, happy face,
surprise, whatever. And they ask them to identify what emotion they're feeling, and they get it totally wrong. It's totally different. They maybe get one like slightly above 50% for happy, but all the other ones are just.
But that control group was selected specifically because they haven't been socialized and watched TV to understand things like we have.
Yeah. So he in one of the interviews I saw about this book with Malcolm Gladwell, he said even like surprise for them wasn't a facial expression. They just made like a sound. So I
wonder how you do resting bitch click.
Yeah.
How that works.
But to Amanda Knox, she was like just saying just really odd things around the time of this murder, and they were going like just her reactions were not matching up with the scenario. But there was no evidence that she was even anywhere near, their residence when all this took place. There was no evidence against her. There was nothing other than that she happened to live with this girl, and they had no other suspects. So if you haven't watched the Amanda Knox documentary, definitely check it out. It's a fascinating psychology study.
Somebody at the funeral asked her or said, "I hope she didn't suffer," and she said she had her throat fucking slit. Like that was her reaction to it.
Yeah.
Like she showed no remorse, and on the outside she showed no remorse.
Well, that was one of the things that Gladwell points out is like, some of the investigators were like, she's showing no remorse. Well, wait a second. Why the hell should she show remorse? She didn't do anything. She should be mourning maybe, but why should she be remorseful? So, I don't know.
Well, they said too when they were at the crime scene, she put on some booties and like the shoe, and she did like a little dance or something.
Yeah.
And they were talking like how it instantly pointed to like she was guilty because she did some goofy little thing.
She was quirky. She was she was mismatched. She wasn't a murderer.
Mm-hmm. She was probably feeling awkward and just did something silly.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean they had described her as like, she would walk down hallways and pretend to be an elephant or, just silly, goofy stuff like that all the time. And her friends would, if it was just her friends that were seeing her do these things, they'd be like, yeah, that's who she is. But tie in, this, hyper media driven murder case, and it all looks very suspect.
That's good. I mean, was there any other case studies in the book, or I think we've
I think that was most of them. What about the coupling part? You mentioned that in the office the other day.
Yeah,
it's a little bit harder because we don't have the actual case study to go off of, but I'm trying to remember some of these.
I think the main example with coupling is talking about what was her name, the poet, but there was a time period with suicides in England that had to do with the way there was these gas stoves that used carbon monoxide as like one of the main components that like made any.
Just look up gas oven suicide or something.
And it was in England, and there was this big spike in suicide because it made like committing suicide that way.
Because it wasn't messy, right?
It wasn't.
Like, it was like the woman's way to commit suicide.
Yeah, it seemed like it was more associated with women, especially. It's probably where this big spike was. And this poet, I'll think of her name at some point. This is how she killed herself. And she had tried other ways.
Yeah,
The
with a
thing
gun, with hanging.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but anyway, this one method, it was, easy. It was effective. So like the rate of, you dying from this, from basically sticking your head near the oven of this gas stove, turning it on, carbon monoxide.
Yeah, just
kills
slowly,
you.
quietly.
Yeah, and there was this huge spike associated with this versus, like if you take pills or something like it, the actual rate of dying is very low. But it was because it made suicide easy and clean. There was this big spike. So you kind of think it's like, oh, if you're going to commit suicide, you're just going to do it and you're hell bent on it.
It's
but
not actually the case.
It's not necessarily the case if you have the means to do this. So he also talks about the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco was another example of this. And people think, because I don't know how many people jump off the Golden Gate Bridge each year, but that's kind of the way where it's coupled. Like people are associated with like jumping off a bridge, jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge, and I think it was something where it was a time when it was closed or they had like netting under it for construction, like the rate
plummeted,
and it's like, well, if you address this one issue, they're just going to find another way to do it. But it's kind of interesting because I think very much like when you're trying to introduce habits into your own life that are like in a positive, you can use this in a positive way where you couple certain things. So if you make something like really easy to do, or you provide, if you're trying to stop something and you put a little bit of resistance to it, then it can make you more effective at whatever it is you want to do. So I'll give an example that I use is like trying to wake up and not hit the snooze alarm, like putting my cell phone, I put it on the dresser, so I have to actually get up physically out of bed to hit the snooze on it versus
you keep yours close. We get up at 4, so I'm curious.
Mine's close.
Versus a lot, like I'd find myself, it was right on within arm's reach on the dresser. I would hit it maybe like sometimes not even aware that I'm doing it, but you're a lot more likely. And just the simple act of moving it, so you have to get up. Once you're out of bed, it's like, well, okay, I'm gonna get up, and that's how you can introduce a lot of new.
We've talked about just the act of getting up gets you going.
Yeah,
if you can get upright, you can go on. But
they have an alarm clock where it's a pad where you have to stand up before it'll stop.
I just started keeping meth next to my counter. It's a little pipe. Just hit it and go.
Accelerator.
Yep. And I listen to David Goggins and go about my day.
There you go.
And then also tying this all back to because I think this is the last case study that we probably haven't mentioned yet or want to mention in this podcast, is that coupling is something that was done in policing of Kansas City, where this Kansas City experiment, where crime is coupled in bad neighborhoods just to like specific streets. So they talked about, I know they mentioned, just as an example, like there was this prostitute on this one street, and it's like you police this and get rid of it there. It's like, well, she just find another street to go to, but
not actually.
But she knows, she knows she's, going to be safer on this. She's not going to be encroaching on someone else's territory. She's familiar so that she can actually do it there. Like instead of just moving, it just, when they cut down here, they stop it. So they found these certain blocks where all the crime was, and they focused on that. And the way they did that is they just, pulled over everybody for that with this coupling, and that's what led to the kind of culture where we're stopping everyone for these stupid traffic violations.
Yeah.
But the problem is it's not effective because it's not coupled with what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be we're coupling these traffic stops with these crime infested small areas within specific neighborhoods where that really needs, to be rid of crime. Instead, we're just taking this to the middle of nowhere, Prairie View, Texas.
Yeah.
So
right. I was expecting him during this portion to make the jump like to guns, and if there was some sort of, he's probably leading you there intentionally, I would probably guess. But if there's some sort of coupling between, like, if you're in that like kind of deranged state, you're looking to inflict mass carnage.
So sorry to interrupt, but
No,
I have a kind of a interesting point that's parallel to this that was brought up. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Scott Adams. He was originally the founder of the creator of Dilbert. Yes, he's the creator of Dilbert. Actually, he wrote a book called How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big, which is one of my all-time favorite books. And so I
add that to the list.
Yeah, and I can come back and talk forever about that because it's probably one of the most impactful.
You're the
books.
perfect guest for this show because you're a nonfiction reader and you're into this stuff. So,
but
yes.
And then within the past few years, he was actually well known because he was the first person, one of the first two at least, to publicly say that Donald Trump was going to be predict that Donald Trump was going to be president of the U.S. This was back when there was 20 Republican candidates and nobody was taking him seriously. But he identified, because he's a trained hypnotist, he was able to identify some of this persuasion techniques that Donald Trump had that was just like a superpower, and he was able to recognize it. So he was just using it just from this filter of politics is all about persuasion, and he's like arguably the most persuasive person there is in terms of the skill set he has, and he used that to predict that this guy's going to be president, and so it happened.
That's awesome.
But, so going back to coupling and guns, his thought experiment was, well, what if you you let people have guns, but you painted them all pink? Then it takes away from, this coupling image. It's like, oh, like these troubled kids, I'm going to go, I'm going to have power. I'm going to go shoot up a school or whatever. But you have this pink gun. And then it's kind of like just by doing that, you're kind of like the coupling with pink is like, oh, that's kind of, weak or,
pansy.
Yeah. So if we did that, what would happen?
That's interesting.
So I don't know where I was going with that, but
no, that's a great point. I mean, he didn't specifically dive into guns, which, like I said, I was fully expecting, but it certainly leads you there. And I know we have an episode soonish
his first
talking about guns.
His first question they asked me when I told him that he could be on, do you want me to bring my AR-15?
Jesus.
Like, well, yeah.
Oh boy, I'm nervous. I thought you were going to ask, you got a bunch of libtards on there?
No.
Take an office pop on that episode.
I wonder if this was it seems obvious now that we track the actual location of crime, but it seems like maybe this was the genesis of that. They're talking about this guy's study of actually pinpointing on the map where specific crime was taking place. And before that, they had this perception that it would be an entire blocks or
you think of bad neighborhoods,
right? And
it's actually a bad couple of streets.
Yeah, it's maybe 5% of the entire neighborhood. I thought that was pretty interesting. I know I'm going to remember stuff afterwards that I was wanting to talk about, but
I think in terms of this book, you did a good job of touching on a little bit of all the key points. So.
Yeah. So our biggest takeaways from this, I think I mentioned mine. What do you think?
it's hard. For me, it seemed like it just made it hard to trust people, almost in a cynical way. Or at least not to be as quick to accept everything that people tell you.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think, like, most of us aren't, like, we interpret, like, these big cases just, like, kind of like we were talking about, like, on the fringe. But, like, to take it into your, like, day-to-day, like, like we were saying earlier, we don't understand everybody's emotions or thoughts just based off of what is going on with their body language.
Well, I've always thought that I was a good read of character with people, but after reading this, I'm just guessing.
Yeah.
I mean, if the FBI can't do it, I can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think for me the big takeaway is just a reinforcement of, it's one of Stephen Covey's habits of highly successful people, is the first seek to understand, then seek to be understood. So I think, it's a lot of, if you just like take the time to explore an issue or explore people, get a different perspective on things. I know, for me, I always have a rule with myself. If ever I watch Fox News, I have to give almost equal time to CNN or some other to like kind of understand, like, I'm getting two totally different sides of the same story, and the truth probably lays somewhere in between. So I think that's my main takeaway at sort of a macro level.
Yeah. I mean, communication is just tricky, man. Like, I mean, that's kind of the industry that we work in, right? Is, we're relaying, like, big money items to people that otherwise don't deal with that line of work.
Yeah, it's really just asking questions. I think the important thing is you don't, like, just ask questions. Like, you don't think you have the answer. You have to just ask people, because you can't read them. You're not going to be able to just assume things.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Assumption can lead you to some bad places. So I think that's all we got. Hey, come on again, because this was probably the best book that we've read. I think so, anyway.
Cool. Yeah, it was awesome. Definitely.
So, all right. Thanks, man. All right. What we got next week? Do you remember?
It's
I thought it was the guns.
No, guns is the week after. That's Craig.
Lee
the video or the audio. It'll just be audio.
Oh yeah. We got
phone interview.
Lee Covington, who is on a Navy ship right now. No, he's in the Navy, but he's not on a ship right now.
I thought he was like in Washington or something.
Yeah, he's somewhere way the hell away. I don't know.
We're gonna ask him about all kinds of classified shit.
So he'll be videoing it. He'll be our first video guest.
Or audio. Don't promise video. Audio for sure. We're gonna try to work.
So we're just gonna be talking to the clouds.
Yeah.
I was hoping that you were going to be able to Photoshop him in just sitting there.
Well, yeah.
Come on, man.
I can do that.
And
but I'm saying, like, we'll try.
Just have his head. Blah, blah, blah.
We'll try to do the video. We'll try. But I can't promise audio for sure. Hopefully video. Hopefully video.
We'll figure all that out. I know he wants to talk about nuclear power and trading cards.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like hand in hand, right?
Right, of course. Okay, go learn something this week.